Have you ever heard someone brag, "Yeah, I taught 3,000 students"? Well, over 2,000 years ago, one man actually made that claim. His name? Confucius, China's most famous philosopher. But did he really teach thousands? Or is this just ancient hype? Let's dig in. Confucius, or Kongzi, lived around 500 BCE during a time of chaos and war in China. He wasn't a king, a general, or even particularly rich. He was a teacher. But not just any teacher. He's basically the grandfather of education in Chinese culture. In fact, in the records of the grand historian, the who's who of ancient China, Confucius once said he had 3,000 students. But here's where it gets interesting. Another part of the same historical record claims Confucius had 77 true students. Now, I'm no stranger to padding my resume. I'm sure we've all done it. But a jump that big is a bit much. How do you go from 77 to 3,000? That's like a college professor saying, "I have a few close grad students." Oh, and also half the population of a small town. So what is the explanation for the jump from about 77 to about 40 times that? Was Confucius just lying? Maybe it was a fish story, where his numbers were exaggerated each time the story was told. Or was it just the result of an ancient PR team? Well, ancient Chinese education didn't work the way we imagine schools today. There were no formal classrooms, no desks, no grades, just a teacher and whoever wanted to learn. In Confucius's case, his students fell into 3 levels: inner circle disciples, registered students, and drop-in fans. Inner circle disciples were the 77 students personally mentored by Confucius. They were kind of like PhD candidates. They learned by his side, debated his ideas, even ran errands for him. These were the ride or die followers. You couldn't just decide to be in the inner circle or pay your way in. Members were handpicked by Confucius himself and followed him on foot through the 7 kingdoms to lecture kings and lords on ethics. If the inner circle disciples were like PhD students, registered students were the equivalent of undergrads. They didn't study directly under Confucius, but they were officially part of his school. Confucius's top disciples were the ones who taught them. Even though they didn't study directly under Confucius, they were on the roster and helped bump the numbers up. Now, drop-in fans were the real source of that 3,000 number. These were people who heard Confucius was in town and showed up to hear him speak. They didn't pay tuition, they didn't do assignments, some probably didn't even understand what he was saying. But hey, it was Confucius. You went. It was like dropping in on a TED Talk, if TED Talks were given in robes under a tree. So while Confucius might have inspired over 3,000 people, he did really only have 77 students. And of those, only 35 are remembered by name. But in a way, that's even more impressive, to have only 77 students, but still be remembered over 2,000 years later. What's really amazing is the diversity of his followers. Rich and poor, merchant and farmer, noble and slave, all came together to learn from a man who believed virtue and wisdom were more important than birth or wealth. So next time someone says they have thousands of followers, ask them, "Yeah, but how many of them would follow you on foot through 7 kingdoms just to hear you talk about ethics?"